Hello and welcome to another episode of a Brothers Creed podcast where we talk about motivation, experiences, and we explore the world around us. We're the Thomas Brothers. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Jared. And today we are talking about the attribute of tolerance. It's an interesting attribute. I've got some, there's an interesting paradox that exists with this attribute. One of the things I'm going to talk about today. And something that in our society, in different societies, they handle tolerance differently. So we're talking about from a societal standpoint, from a personal standpoint, and then ultimately kind of where you draw those lines of being tolerant versus intolerant. So it's an exciting episode, and let's go ahead and jump in.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back.
The most valuable commodity I know of is information.
And that, my friends, is called integrity. That's called courage. Now that's the stuff leaders should be made of.
Either you're somebody or you're nobody.
You're not the devil. You're practice.
All right, man. How you been? Your voice sounds like you're a little bit sick. You doing good?
Yeah, I'm kind of coming out of it. I think over the weekend I was kind of I don't know, had a little bit of a cold, and then it just seems like everything always gets worse at night. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, still a little raspy, but feeling a lot better. So that's good.
That's good. We've been doing some like grape juice. We've been drinking grape juice like every morning with the kids, and drinking like probiotics and all these other like little like things, vitamins and stuff that goes into it. And we've been doing that since the beginning of the school year, and for the most part, everybody's been pretty healthy around our house. So
yeah, this year compared to last year, it's been a lot better. Knock on wood. But yeah, and I typically, it really hasn't been that bad. It's just been kind of a voice thing, and then when I wake up in the morning, I'm just congested and stuff. But which typically it clears up. So yeah, when I kind of started feeling it come on, I hit the vitamins pretty hard. I feel like it potentially helps stay off some of that. I don't feel like I ever got really sick.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. Hopefully the kids don't get it.
Yeah.
Too bad.
Yeah. So I know last week you had your birthday on the 7th. How does it feel to be older now? To be 34 now?
Great. Yeah. Feels the same as it did yesterday. Still got to pay those bills.
Yeah. Did you guys do anything interesting or fun?
We just kind of hung out. It's kind of a tradition that my wife and I do, where we just kind of go for kind of more of like experiences for birthdays rather than like presents. And so we'll just go out and we'll, spend a night away from the house. We'll have, somebody watch the kids for the night, and we'll just kind of just make a whole evening of it,
Yeah.
We'll go do something, go get great food, and we'll hang out and we'll chill and talk, and we just kind of really like that. So it was nice.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I hadn't quite started feeling kind of coldish yet, so that was good.
Maybe partying at the club until like 4 a.m. with glow sticks in your mouth. Maybe that was the reason why you're feeling a little bit sick.
Yeah, the rave.
It takes a long time to recover from something like that.
Nowadays, when I was 33, it wasn't that bad, but now I'm 34.
Now that it's over. It's just beyond.
Yeah. The day after, my youngest, who's 2 years old now, he doesn't really take. Well, he does take naps sometimes in his room. But we've kind of gone away from naps and really just kind of like quiet time in your room for a couple hours in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And he has like this like little teepee in his room that he like hangs out in and stuff. So we'd done that a couple times, and so we let him in there, and uh he's in there, my wife's downstairs doing something and I'm working, and then he comes out of the room, and I guess he walks downstairs, and I just hear my wife like yelling like, "What in the world is going on?" And so I come out, and she's coming up the stairs, and he's walking up behind her, and he is like covered like white in baby powder.
Oh
And we're just
man.
like, "Oh, dude." And so
And
we went
vacuuming
into
that
his
stuff up just goes right out the back of the vacuum.
yeah, seriously. And so we went into his room, and the entire room was covered in we had like a big jar of baby powder.
That was supposed to last you through all your kids.
Seriously, and it was like full. And so
Oh,
we went
gosh.
back and we went back and we watched the
Ring
camera
camera,
that's in
yeah.
his room.
Yeah.
And we went back, and it was just funny because there was like all these toys laying around on his floor, and he went around to every toy and like shook a bunch of like a pile onto every toy. So like every little like Matchbox car, there's like a pile
Oh
of baby powder on it,
gosh.
and then a pile of baby powder on this and on that and on this, and then he was like dumped it all on his bed. I mean, he dumped the whole thing
Oh
out,
man.
and it was like at one point it was like on the walls, and I was like, how did he? I was like, how did it get on the walls? Like, and then we were looking back, and he's standing on top of his dresser, just like
Flinging it.
going back and forth, just flinging it everywhere. And it was just like, oh, dude,
Dude, he's living his best life. He's like, and guess best part? I don't have to clean this up.
seriously. No, I made him sit at the door, and sit there while I cleaned it up for 45 minutes.
The thing about that is it's so fine that like your vacuum filter, like it's hard for it to almost catch it because it just blows it back out. Jeez.
Yeah. I mean, it cleaned up better than like throw up.
Oh yeah, that's true.
or like lotion or
Oh gosh, yeah.
Vaseline or something like that, or shampoo if you would have gotten into that. So the vacuum cleaner actually did a pretty good job. But I ended up just anything that was like soft, I just like folded it up in a blanket and then just like took it outside and shook it out.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. I bet that whole room smells like baby powder now.
Oh yeah, for like 2 days it smelled like it was like I felt like I had the white lung coming out of there after I was done cleaning.
The
it.
white lung. Racist. Yeah, we haven't had that, but we've had situations where we'll walk in the morning and then like all the wet wipes will just be all pulled out and all over the place. And it's just like, the stingy guy, the part of me in my brain that's like really stingy. I'm like, what a waste. And I'm like, we need to save these wet wipes. So I try to put them in like a plastic bag or something, but they never keep.
No.
It's just you have to accept the loss, accept the L, and just toss them in the trash.
Yeah, I was we were changing our youngest one's still in diapers, and so we were changing his diapers. He's like right on the point of potty training, but we're kind of just letting him kind of letting him
Self-wean.
guide that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of just, so he'll sometimes he'll tell us, sometimes he won't, and so we're just kind of not too worried about it. But he had a poopy diaper, and so we were changing him, and my oldest son was like, "Oh, that's gross." I was like, "Well, yeah." I was like, "Do you know how many diapers we've changed?" Like,
Over the
in
past 9 years.
in the past, almost 10 years. I was like, "You know
Yeah.
how many diapers we changed?" He's like, "I don't know, probably like 10 million." I was like, "No." Feels like it, but no.
Yeah.
But I was like, "No," and then I was like, "It's been a lot." And I was like, "Do you know that every single diaper you change is like 17 cents?" And then I'm like going back through, and I'm like, "Well, 17 cents plus the wipes, which are probably a couple cents each." It's just like, dude, that's like a quarter every single time.
It's like
Every
going to the
single time
range. Boom.
I know.
boom.
And I'm like, hey, man, imagine how many shots downrange I could have with all these diapers over the years. And then I thought to myself, well, maybe whenever he goes off of diapers, then maybe the diaper budget will become my ammo budget.
There you go. Still spending those quarters a little bit faster though than
Yeah, well, if I take
Then
like
your
three a
daily bowel,
day,
2 daily bowel movements.
yeah, 3 a day, and if I go to the range, like once a month or every other month, and I'll have enough for a couple mags.
There you go. That's a positive thinking.
Yeah, I'll just switch it from one line of the budget to another to a different line of the budget.
Yeah.
Give every dollar a job. This is a poop job. Now it's a protection job.
Yeah, exactly. That's good to hear, man. Well, yeah, we're still potty training ours. He's on and off.
Yeah.
He still doesn't have the wiping down yet, so he's like, Dad. He doesn't know that he has to call us, so we're trying to get that down. So half the time he'll just go, and then he like just gets off and does his thing. We're like, someone was in here. It's like, oh, it's probably the littlest,
Yeah. Yeah, it's always baffling to me when I go in the bathroom and somebody went in there, went to the bathroom, and there's poop in the toilet, but then there's no toilet paper. And I'm like, I know that wasn't me.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't your mom.
Based off of the size of these little nuggets, it was probably one of the middle two. Yeah, younger two. Yeah, seriously. Well, it's good to hear things are going well.
It's all good times. It's all good experiences.
Yep. It's part of the process, raising these kiddos.
Part of the journey. Makes good stories for later.
Yeah.
Document those stories.
Yeah.
Write them down. Take pictures. My wife was like, I am so mad right now, but I'm going to go get my camera so I can remember this. And I was like, okay. So when she came up and she like took some pictures, and then she was like, all right. Then we cleaned it up.
Nice. Yeah. Well, we got.
Sometimes we need to tolerate these little children.
Exactly. Tolerate these children. I was gonna say, you've heard that thing where the lady's like, somebody needs to take responsibility for all these kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She had like 15 kids, and she's living in a little hotel room. She's like, yeah, somebody's got to take responsibility for all these kids.
Yeah. Did you hear about that?
Who's gonna feed them?
Yeah.
Who's gonna put clothes on their backs?
Did you hear about that lady that like she had a son, single mom. Her son was in school, went through all of high school. He had like a .15 GPA. Goes through all of high school, 4 years, and then he doesn't graduate, and she's like, somebody failed my son. The school failed my son, and it's just unbelievable that they would fail my son like that. And I'm like, and everybody's like, what are you talking about, dude? You never checked your kid's grades in 4 years of high school, and he has a .14 GPA. Obviously, he's not going to pass.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's shocking.
Somebody failed there. Yeah. Shocking.
How people like just are in so much denial that they like just pawn off that responsibility. They're like, oh, the government is supposed to take care of my kids. Imagine thinking that the government is responsible to take care of your kids.
I was literally just reading this thing that was saying that I think it's in Washington. They are doing away with any standardized testing because it
hurts minority communities.
Yeah, what was it? It was I don't know, racist towards minority communities. It's like, I mean, that's standardized testings, and no, there's no basically no grade requirements. It's just like, I guess it's all attendance based. If you attend, you graduate. If you attend a certain percentage amount of the time.
Sounds like you're setting your kids up for failure. I would not tolerate that if that was my school system.
No.
It's a great segue into the topic today. Tolerance. What is tolerance, Ethan?
Well, according to Webster, no. I went through and kind of put together some of my opinions of tolerance. I think tolerance, maybe in its regulated form, maybe I'll say that, is a great thing. I think it is. I think it is good to. Well, let me read this. So, tolerance is the capacity to accept, respect, and appreciate the diverse opinions of others, their beliefs, their practices, and characteristics of individuals or other groups. even if they differ from one's own. So I think in general, it is good to, respect other people of their, um, you know, beliefs and um, ways of life and opinions and political opinions and whatever else you want to call it. I think that's a wonderful thing. And I think we probably need a little bit more tolerance in today's day and age. And I kind of equate it to like patience or compassion, understanding, um, a desire for, I don't know. I think being tolerant provides an opportunity to build more fulfilled relationships, and or maybe allows for a stronger foundation for interacting with others. Um, I think maybe the pure opposite of tolerance is like bigotry, maybe, or I don't know, non acceptance. But I think a lot of these words are thrown around like crazy because I can tolerate something, and we might get into this, but I can tolerate something up until a certain point.
Yeah. Well, why
And then,
yeah.
so,
Why do you think that? Why would you say that you think that society needs, or you talking about? You said we need more tolerance now. I'm curious as to understand like why you think
yeah,
that
I
is.
guess when you're talking specifically in the fact of like, people's preferences or, um, trying to figure out the best way to word these without being extremely offensive or um and maybe the word respect really kind of is the word I'm pulling out from that. I feel like we do need more respect in today's day and age, right? And I think tolerance is understanding that someone else might have differing opinions, and that's okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that is where I'm saying that I think that we can maybe use more tolerance in is in just saying like, oh, okay, you know, if someone is, completely opposed to the Second Amendment and, they're out there screaming and all this other kind of stuff, and they, and then I go to them and I'm, pro Second Amendment and I think being able to have a conversation is kind of a show of tolerance. Like if you can
Mm-hmm.
actually have a conversation with
Yeah.
them and they could say, oh, well, A, B, C, D is why I don't think it's good. And I say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, I think, A, B, C, D, E is why this is good.
Mm-hmm.
And and being able to listen to each other and say, okay, all right, well, you believe that. I believe this other. So, you know, good conversation and doesn't get into like, spitting on each other or
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I feel like maybe tolerance and open mindedness.
yeah, maybe that's where I was getting at. Yeah.
But I think that open mindedness is being maybe open minded to hearing new opinions and things like that. Tolerance, I feel, is more like you don't agree with what somebody's saying, but you're allowing it because you respect their ability to say it.
Yeah, I think open-mindedness is kind of a precursor to change.
Uh-huh.
I don't think tolerance is a precursor to change. I think tolerance is based purely on I don't agree with you, but I still respect you as a person and, you know, wish you no harm, I guess.
Yeah. There's an interesting kind of description of tolerance that I found. And so it was talking about that this is a guy named Preston King. He came up with these 3 different characteristics or traits of tolerance. And it's kind of interesting. So the first one is the objection component. So this is, he describes it as wherein the object of toleration is objectionable. For instance, a follower of one faith may assert the belief of another faith are wrong. So you may say, I hate the Second Amendment. I don't think people should own guns. Let's say someone says that. The second tenet he talks about is the acceptance component of tolerance, which does not resolve the objection, but instead offers positive reasons for overlooking it, such as societal harmony. Well, in our society, we have freedom of speech, and you have the right to say that, and I respect your right to say that you dislike the Second Amendment, and I respect you to say that, but I don't agree with you. So there's that objection component that you don't agree with, that you have to tolerate. I think that's the difference between open-mindedness, is that there's that objection component, and then there's the exception component. So you accept for a certain reason, the exception component outweighs the objection component. Now, the third piece of this is really where this paradox comes in, is that there is a rejection component. He says, which defines the limit of tolerance. At what point the positive reasons are outweighed by the objection. So there's a certain, when you are tolerant, you're drawing lines in your head of where intolerance will begin. And so the paradox really is around that last one. He goes on to say, most formulations of tolerance assert that tolerance is a reciprocal act, and that intolerance need not be tolerated. So what he's saying is that whenever there is an act of tolerance, so if I'm tolerating something that you're saying, in that very act, I am drawing the lines of where intolerance is in my mind, of how far I will allow you to take that. So by being tolerant, I'm also being intolerant at the same time. Does that make sense? It's kind of, you see how that's a kind of a paradox?
Yeah.
So it's like,
you're like, this is the line of okay and not okay.
Yeah. So for example, I think a kind of a clear one is this, like, that probably, well, some people may agree with this, that say, well, I can tolerate, two guys or two women getting married. Okay. I can tolerate them and their right to do that. I respect their right to get. Sorry, I had to sneeze. I respect their right to get married. They're consenting adults. They can go ahead and get married. But in that act of tolerance, I'm drawing a line in my head. Say, okay, well, where is that line where I will not tolerate it? Well, a guy marrying a child or a minor, or a woman marrying a minor, or not necessarily marrying, but like being intimate with a minor. It's like, well, am I going to be tolerant of that? But what if it's a 19-year-old and what if it's an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old? Is that okay? I can say, well, I might be a little bit tolerant of that, but what if it's like a 50-year-old and a 6-year-old? It's like, that's a different line. So by being tolerant with these different things, I'm drawing these lines of saying, well, this is too far, this is a maybe, this is definitely a no, and this is a yes. And so it's kind of a dance that you have to do that involves what that line is. So that's kind of part of tolerance.
Yeah, for sure. And I was trying to come up with lots of different, examples of different things of kind of, I equated it to at what point does tolerance start to go against morals, which is kind of that tolerant line of when it starts to reach, I'm intolerant, or I will not tolerate that to a certain level. And it's interesting because, if tolerance extends to, tolerating actions that are harmful or maybe, discriminatory, or, maybe they blatantly violate human rights, or if it's something that's like really in conflict with my moral convictions or path, then yeah, it's like, at what point do you say no? Enough is enough. And I think it's different for everybody, right?
Eh,
You had
yeah.
given the example of two consenting adults, maybe of the same gender, wanting to get married, right? And file their taxes jointly. I mean, okay, like, does that really affect me in my daily life every day? I don't know, right? Or somebody that wants to, a guy who wants to dress up in drag and walk down the street, like, okay, you can, I choose my clothes out in the morning, you can choose your clothes out in the morning,
Hmm.
right? But am I going to draw the line at them having drag shows at preschools? Or like preaching this to my children,
Yeah.
right? And so to me there is a line of tolerance, and then it goes over that line into what I consider to be an immoral place,
Hmm.
which is whether it's involving children, or um you know using the incorrect bathroom, or how whatever direction you want to go. But yeah, I mean, that is something, whenever your decision starts affecting the rights of others, and starts violating those opportunities with your behaviors, then yeah,
I think it's
I mean,
interesting, but like,
draw that line.
what is the great, like the way that you describe that, it kind of begs the question: what is the gradient of morality? So, for example, I would say if you're tolerant of something, you already disagree with that thing. So,
Yeah.
let's say some people, let's say, well, I'm tolerant of mixed race couples getting married. There's people that really are against that. I'm tolerant of mixed race couples, and so maybe that is like, do we accept things along a moral kind of spectrum, where we say that's okay, but like maybe for someone it's like, well, mixed race couples are, that's about the edge of my tolerance, but for me, my morals don't extend anything beyond. So a guy and a guy, or a woman and a woman getting married, that is absolutely way far beyond. So it's actually kind of like, by making these decisions, we are setting like ABCD grades for our kind of the limits of our morals. And I think that in some ways, tolerance in society pushes that envelope of what we're willing to accept more and more and more. In some ways, likely good. In some ways, I think bad. In some way, a good example would be, uh, giving women the right to vote. It's just like, women can't vote. Their job is in the kitchen. But like, well, I think it's someone at one point, Susan B. Anthony. There was plenty of other women that was like, hey, you know what? I think we deserve the right to vote just like anybody else. And so some people had to tolerate that, and on the spectrum of what they believed was morally appropriate. Maybe that was, so for some folks, it was at the edge for a long while, and then it became accepted because I think people tolerated that, and that was a good thing that came out of it. I think there's bad things that come out of moral tolerance, because people are tolerating a lot of this. I feel like right now, a lot of the stuff that people are doing to these kids, you're transitioning kids to making them take hormone blockers and surgeries and all this horrible stuff, when you have like a 6 or a 9-year-old, or even a 15-year, even just a child, life altering chemicals and surgeries, because the child may be confused or something like that. And parents and even the government in some cases is just giving into that. I heard one thing that was said that like, people who wouldn't allow their kids to transition would no longer be allowed to foster kids. This was probably in California. But it's just like, man, like, we've gone so far off the rails, and it's like, how did we get here? It's like, well, I think we got here by being tolerant to some of those things, so that now the fringe is this, just like the fringe of that tolerance is this wild thing that we're at. Well, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
It seems like it's constantly a moving target too, because if and my wife and mother-in-law always say this phrase, but it's like, specifically talking about the kids, right? If you're eating a cookie, right, and you're 2-year-old comes up and says, "Bite, bite, bite, can I have a bite?" Give him a little bite, and what is he going to do? He's going to run off until he finishes that bite, and he's going to come right back and want more. And so the phrase is that we always just say, "Oh, you give a mouse a cookie, right? You give a mouse a cookie, and he's going to want another one. Is he going to want another one? Is he going to want another one?" And so I think tolerance in general, just the name tolerant or tolerance, it has a negative connotation to it because, yeah, if you're being tolerant, then you already dislike what's going on. And so, but yeah, you give a mouse a cookie and you say, okay, well, I will tolerate this up to this point. And then it's like, oh, well, if you're okay with this, then why wouldn't you be okay with this? And then it's like, well, okay, I can see that. And it's like, well, why wouldn't you be okay with this then? And then this, and then this, and then this, and then this. And to be completely blatant, and maybe we'll get canceled for this, but it's like, so at first you had LGB, LGB, right? That was it, right? And then now it's LGBT, right? And then now it's LGBTI, and LGBTIA, and LGBTI
QIA, TA+,
QI plus, and all this stuff. And then now there these, like you said, there's these what do they call them? MAPs, minor attracted people, pedophiles, that they are tacking their letters onto that LGBTQIA plus maps, all this different kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And there's even people within that community that's like, whoa. I don't want to have anything to do with pedophiles.
Yeah.
Right. And they're like, oh, well, but we're all one big group that we're tolerant of each other. We're all tolerant.
Yeah.
And so it's dangerous. It's dangerous. And I think that's one reason why people push back so hard against, gay marriage or LGBTQ stuff, because it's just like, I mean, you open that door and it's once you open, I don't want to say Pandora's box, like you can't get it closed.
Yeah.
And it just continues to open wider and wider and wider and wider and wider. And you can't reel it back in.
Yeah. I know that there actually are some like kind of advocates out there, like gay and lesbian folks, that are advocate against that. They're like, this stuff is grooming. And a lot of stuff that happens, there is grooming, and these minor attracted persons, like, this is not what we asked for when we wanted to get married.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, too,
listen to them.
And I guess a preface, not a preface. I don't know what an epilogue to that, whatever after the fact, is that, I mean, I'm stating observations here. All of these aren't my particular opinions, but a lot of these observations that I've seen have been people that I know personally in that community, as well as research and stories that I have heard from people that are that agree.
Well,
and so
I think that sometimes it's like there's such a generational impact as well. So think about it, like the things that our parents were just tolerating now became kind of a norm, right? So when I was growing up, a lot of parents just kind of tolerated, video games, or they're just like, oh, this is bad, this is horrible, our society's going downhill, and I hate this, but I'm going to be tolerant of it. And then, like, now video games is a huge thing, and like there's whole industries built off of this, and it's a norm. And so, like, perhaps it's a generational thing. When a certain generation tolerates an activity, the next generation, they see that as the norm, and then they tolerate the next level beyond that because it's just the norm. Like, oh, I just tolerate that everybody that or the company has these initiatives to help every single minority and every single sex except for a white male. Yeah, I'm just going to tolerate that. And what's the next generation going to be? When my kids get into the workforce, is it going to be like, oh, sorry, you're a white male, you definitely can't be hired here? Is that what that next extreme is? So it just kind of makes me wonder. It's like, well, I think that, like, so it's like this balancing act. It's like, well, does the good that I'm getting, or that, there's the objection and then there's the acceptance portion. Is the good outweighing that bad that I object to? It's like, well, I can't see the future, and I don't actually know all of the bad that thing might come. And so perhaps right now the good outweighs the bad, But what about 50 years from now? If this keeps going on, does it outweigh then? So that's the kind of question you got to answer in your head.
And the something that's, well, I was gonna say a little bit scary is that the tolerance level of an individual is different for everyone. I'm sure you have some people that they're maybe on sync and their tolerance levels are relatively close, or um, I would say some people are more tolerant, some people are less tolerant. But no, I mean it could be all over the place, and so it's hard to, I'm even thinking just like political party, right? Political affiliation. Oh, you're a Republican or you're Democrat. There's only two parties.
Yeah.
Which the original system created for a democratic republic, such as the United States, was not a two-party system, but that's a whole different conversation. But it's like, you're kind of forced to align yourself with one group or another based on tolerance to certain issues. It's like, I don't know, this Ukraine thing. It's like, oh, the the people in Ukraine and the civilians in Ukraine are being, bombed and killed by the Russians and everything else. It's like, oh, that's terrible. And then they're like, oh, well, we need to go in there. We need to do all this kind of stuff. So there's like maybe there's very low tolerance for any human rights violations there, right? But then what was it? Several years ago in China, they were having mass genocides of millions and millions of people being killed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like, but there was not even a news topic on that,
Yeah.
right? Not even a conversation on that. Oh, so it just turned a blind eye. Obviously, we are very tolerant as a nation to, genocide in other certain countries, but some people fighting about over a war that was self-inflicted to a certain extent, we're all over it.
Well, it's because that's where the money flows. There's no money
Yep.
in China or like, in supporting that or even being aware of that. And there's so many Chinese players that are like, man, let's not talk about that. But that's why this whole Israel Hamas thing is so confusing, because the media is just like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely crazy. And it's hard to believe what they say, because we know that they're lying about a lot of the stuff in Ukraine. Like, they're lying about so much stuff in Ukraine. In fact, I've seen like videos of like people cleaning up debris after a bombing, and they're picking up like giant concrete pieces, like it's obviously styrofoam, right? And it's
Just
like,
props.
this is all staged. This is all props. I mean, not everything, but like that video specifically I was watching, I was like, this is staged so that they can get money, so that he can come and buy it. He's like, please, please, please. And Biden's like, I'm going to give you $200 million right now, and then $1 billion tomorrow. It's just
Billion.
like, come on, dude. So it's hard to believe who is right and who is wrong. And then you have all these people that are for Hamas that are like, or Palestine, that are like, well, Israel's lying about all this kind of stuff, and they're and every time anybody says anything about it, they're immediately called anti-Semite. It's kind of like, yeah, that I can kind of see that. It's like, if you criticize anything about, like a black community, any aspect of it, it's like, oh, immediately you're racist. It's like, well, maybe I disagree with this one thing that this community is doing without being racist. It's like, so that's like an impenetrable shield that almost exists. It's like, well, we died in the Holocaust, so you want to kill us in the Holocaust again? It's like, well, I can't. Are you saying I can't disagree with you because, like, and you're throwing up the Holocaust in my face because I'm like curious and questioning what you're saying? So it's
That's kind of what I was saying earlier. Is almost, I said I felt like the opposite of tolerance was like bigotry, but I don't think it's the opposite. I think maybe it's like, that's like what the word, that's like the I don't know, what do you call it? The catchphrase or the hot word of, oh, you're a bigot, you're a bigot, you're a bigot if you don't agree with something that
Yeah.
that they say. And so it's kind of like if you tolerate anything at all, then because technically if you tolerate something, then you are intolerant of something too.
Yeah,
So
because you
unless you are completely and utterly accepting of everything, then you're tolerant to a certain extent. You could be very tolerant, but your line still is drawn somewhere.
yeah, exactly.
Um,
It's like, well, I don't like I'm pro Hamas, but my line is when they kill 50 babies, not when they kill 20 babies. So I'm still pro Hamas. It's like,
yeah.
where is your line of like, well, Israel has killed 1,000 people in Gaza. Okay, well, Gaza killed
Well, they
2,000
bombed a
people.
they bombed a hospital.
Well,
You know,
they killed 2,000 people at an EDM concert. So, like, what is the value of the lives here? And like, what is the line? Like, they kill adults and they kill babies, so it's like not equal. So it's just so funny how we
yeah.
draw these lines.
Well, and I think we're talking about big issues here.
Yeah.
But I think tolerance can be something that is even driven down to like a personal level.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm gonna kind of make up this example, and maybe it's not a good one, but not something that I deal with, right? But I'm thinking like a marriage, like a relationship, and I don't know, maybe I'm gonna talk like so generally that so stereotypically that this is probably a weird example, but let's say that a husband and a wife, and the husband occasionally will drink some beers, you know every other month or a couple times a year, on holidays around Thanksgiving or something like that, and not a big drinker at all, but a couple times a year, and whenever he drinks, he is an angry drunk, and he just gets really angry, and he you know says mean things,
Yeah.
right? The wife is like, yeah, that kind of sucks, but I could tolerate that. Once a year, he's kind of a jerk when he drinks, but rarely ever
It makes
drinks.
lots
So
of
it's
money. So
yeah, so it's just like, okay, I could tolerate that. Not
yeah.
that big a deal.
Yeah.
But then, that tolerance goes, and then maybe the drinking is a little bit more, and not everyone's an angry drunk, right? Some people are happy drunks or whatever else, but you know, and then one time, 10 years into their marriage, he gets super upset and he pushes her really hard. And then she's like, "Oh, well, he was drunk or whatever, and it was an accident, or okay." And then maybe the next year comes around, and he pushes her a little harder, or hits her, or slaps her, or I don't know, gets more aggressive, more abusive to a certain extent. And then it's like, "Oh, okay, well, this is kind of getting, is this getting close to my level of intolerance?" And so, I think, abuse or violence to a certain extent, there is a tolerance factor, whether it's personal, or even whether it's like, what if you're sitting on a bus, and there's a couple, that's sitting in front of you, and or not even a couple. Let's say you're sitting on a bus, and there's a girl that's sitting by herself, and then there's like a homeless guy gets on the bus or something, and he's like, "Hey, sweetheart, how's it going?" And she just like, "Yeah, fine," or and then he's like, "Oh, well, you're really pretty," and she's like, "Oh, thanks." And then you're sitting here, you're watching it the whole time. Like, my tolerance factor at that point is I'm vigilant. I'm like, okay, it's not that big a deal. He's bothering her, but she's not, whatever.
Yeah.
And then he, goes over and he sits next to her, and he's like, "Hey, trying to, get her number or something." Not even a bum, anybody,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then my tolerance meter is kind of going off. Like, I'm like, "Hey," and she's super uncomfortable, and she's like, "Hey, could you leave me alone?" And then he grabs her arm, and then it's like, boom, okay, I got to get up. I got to say something. I
Yeah.
don't tolerate that anymore.
Yeah.
And that's when you get up. You say, "Hey, man, leave her alone. Like, she doesn't want to talk to you."
Yep.
right? So that's like that tolerance reached that line of what I consider moral, or I guess my intolerance level.
Yeah.
And so I think it's things like that we come upon every single day.
But you have to
Um,
have that line, and you have to understand what that is. It's like, and we've seen that personally in kind of a situation, even similar to what you just described, with my wife and I, in a situation that we had where this guy was being like a creeper, and then like he was doing all this bizarre stuff, and it's like everybody around us that we thought were like our friends or would stand up for us, they were just being so tolerant, and they were tolerant to a fault, and it was an excuse not to stay, and it just became like, well, you know, I know that he said he wanted. I know that this creepo guy said that he wanted to do X, Y, and Z to you, but did he actually do them? I don't know. And then like I know that he was shouting out, people by name. Like what? At what point do people stand up? And so like people will become desensitized to things, and then they don't realize how far that person has come. That's why we've talked about other credos. We've talked about self-awareness, being objective, being able to take a step back and be like, a year ago, would I be accepting of where this person has come now? And if the answer is absolutely not, but if they've just inched and inched and inched and inched, then that's how you.
Yeah.
That's how they get you, man. They just do it 1 inch at a time. What does it say in the devil leads you down to hell just by 1 inch at a time, just barely, just get you just a little bit off track, and then, that's how things go. And we saw that firsthand.
I'm trying to decide how deep I want to go down this rabbit hole and how controversial we want to get. But I think sometimes people can have a semblance of tolerance, and probably one of the most one of the most popular phrases that has ever existed is, what would Jesus do?
Yeah.
Right? And I almost think that's dangerous to a certain extent. And this is I'm going to get there. So
Yeah.
but because there are certain things that many people will say that, oh, it's pure love and tolerance of everyone. Yeah, this guy is, like you were saying, is maybe saying stuff and offending you, but he didn't actually touch you, and so it's like, yeah, but everyone else seems to be so tolerant of this situation because I don't know, it's like this Christian value of, oh, we just need to love everyone.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, and I'll be one of the first ones to call it out, a lot of times that's almost a crutch that's utilized
because
when
they're
it's
afraid
convenient,
because they're afraid to stand
because
up.
they're afraid to stand up for themselves or someone else, or it's inconvenient. And so they'll say, oh, it's not my job to interfere, or not my job to judge, not my job to judge. Well, it's like, yeah, but I'm going to start judging when somebody, when
when someone's trying to attack my wife, or when someone's trying to like threaten my family.
Yeah, or someone,
absolutely,
or
yeah.
someone's, or you got a 50-year-old man dressed like a woman sharing a bathroom with my 4-year-old daughter.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, no thanks. And so it's like, I think you kind of got to be careful in the sense of, tolerance is not just like pure love and everybody, everybody's happy and everybody is accepting of each other.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there's several people use good attributes as shields for weakness. And because it's under the guise of something that's so great, you can't really penetrate it or question it or call it out. Because it's like you just said, Oh, tolerance. I'm just being so tolerant. Oh, someone broke into your house. Well, I'm just going to be so tolerant. Oh, someone murdered your wife, your family. I'm just going to be so tolerant. And it's like,
Someone breaks into your house and they're stealing all your stuff. Oh, they must just need it more than I do.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Or I think another one is faith. I think also faith. A lot of times people will say, oh, well, I just have a lot of faith. But really, that's just the shield that they hide. I think that's just easy shield to hide behind. It's not really faith. It's just like, I've already made up my mind and this is what I'm doing, and I don't want to think about that, and I'm going to call that faith. Or I think in some ways people can just be kind of lazy about that, and it's not like active faith. It's not like, yeah, I have a hope that this is going to be true. It's just like, no, I just don't want to think about that. But then they call that faith.
I think you and I don't disagree a lot, but I'm going to disagree a little bit on the faith aspect, because I think faith is personal. Tolerance like takes another individual. Like it takes interaction with someone else to be tolerant.
Mm-hmm.
But faith in and of itself is a very individual principle. And you can have faith in something that doesn't have to do with anyone else, I guess. I don't know if that made sense. But
So you're saying that you have faith. It's an individual thing. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously it is an individual thing. But what I'm saying is that sometimes people will say, "Oh, I'm just being faithful," or "I have faith that this is going to happen," but really, it's just it could be some. Yeah, it absolutely could be the faith sometimes. But I think sometimes that is an easy excuse to just say, "I don't want to think about that." I've already made up my mind about that, so I don't want to think about it. Basically,
yeah, I mean, I guess you could
that's
say
not faith. If you're saying I don't want to think about that, that's not really necessarily faith, because you're not like actively believing. You're just saying like, yeah, I just don't want to think about it.
Yeah, well, I think faith can maybe turn tolerance into just like pure belief to a certain extent, right? And so maybe I think of like,
Well, I wasn't necessarily talking about how those two together. I was just saying that both of those attributes sometimes are used as shields to mask underlying insecurity or underlying, possibly underlying negative attributes. But the shield of these positive attributes comes up,
Yeah, that makes sense.
But interesting. I wanted to share one interesting story from history. This is kind of interesting about tolerance. This little tidbit from history here. So, have you ever heard of the Edict of Milan or the Edict of Toleration?
No.
So, in the year 1313 AD,
I don't tolerate that crap.
well, it's actually a big deal. In the year 1313 AD, the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great and Licinius, they made a decree. So the decree marked a significant moment in the history of the Roman Empire where religious tolerance was allowed. So at the time, the Roman Empire was characterized by religious diversity with a multitude of cults and belief systems coexisting. However, Christians had often faced persecution for their faith. The story of Saul, persecuted the saints, and there's been lots of that was going on. The Edict of Milan, also known as the Edict of Toleration, aimed to change this situation. So the edict granted religious tolerance to not only Christians, but to all religions within the Roman Empire. It declared that people who should be allowed to follow their religious beliefs of their choice without fear of persecution. This edict was a crucial step towards religious freedom and marked the beginning of a more inclusive approach to a diverse religious practices. Now, I think that they did this. Obviously, there's a lot of political motivations behind this. It's hard to rule a people that you're trying to, you're persecuting them or whatnot. But if you think about it, it actually is a way, as far as a way to rule a people, allowing for religious freedoms. We see that in our government of the United States of America today, and it's one of our founding principles is religious freedom. And that was going on in the Roman Empire in 313 AD, and it was kind of some of those first steps towards being a more tolerant society and allowing people to do their worship however they feel is best. So, a little tidbit from history on the Edict of Toleration.
Yeah, that's cool. I had one too, which is kind of interesting. I heard a story, and I can't remember all the details. But basically, it was one of the, I want to say like Indian or Middle Eastern countries in the, I think early 1800s or something like that during British colonization. And so the British colonized this country and basically took over the rule of this country. But in a lot of these colonizations from the British, it was they were ruled by an ambassador of sorts or a minister from Britain that lived there, and he was kind of the ruler of the British Virgin Islands or whatever it is. And then the people just lived their life and their culture like normal. Well, this British governor or whatever got to this new colony, this new country that was colonized, and the chief of this colony was he died. He died from old age or natural causes or whatever, and so it was tradition and culture for these people that whenever the chief died, they burn, and there's a true story, they would burn the chief's wife during the funeral ceremony. They would burn her alive.
Yeah.
And so, the chief died, and the British governor went to the leaders and was like, hey, what's going on? Oh, the chief died. And he was like, okay. And so we're going to have a big funeral for him tomorrow and all this sort of kind of stuff. He's like, all right. So then they start putting all this stuff together for the funeral, and they start putting this, building this sacrifice fire pit at the thing. And he's like, what's going on here? And they're like, oh, well, we're going to burn his wife alive so she can be with him. And he's like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, yeah, I mean, that's what we do. And so the whole thing was, he's like, yeah, I have tolerated some pretty weird stuff that you guys are doing to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
But basically the end of the story was, I'm going to come back tomorrow, and if you do this, I'm going to slaughter you all, right? You all are going to pay for it. And so basically they broke that tradition, and it was no longer a tradition from then on, because that British governor, right, decided that, no, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore.
Yeah, I thought he said something like, there's going to be like 10 gallows here to hang every single person.
Oh, yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, that's what it was. He was like, yeah, and anyone that participated, they'll get hung and killed as well, or something like that.
It wasn't the British Virgin Islands.
No, it was not. It was some.
That was in India.
Yeah, that's what I said in the beginning. I think it was some. I was just using the Virgin Islands as a. Actually, I think it's the American version. Is it British Virgin Islands now? I don't know. Whatever. I was just using that as an example of colonization. But I think it was in India somewhere.
Yeah,
or some Muslim country that has like mercy killings and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, dude, that's awful, man. But yeah, he put a stop to that real quick. He was like, "No, I'm going to shut that down. We don't do that."
Yeah, I don't tolerate that.
And then people say colonization is so horrible.
Yeah,
it depends on your morals, I guess, right? Depends on what you.
Well, and it's interesting too, because it's like, who's to say that the British at that time had the higher moral ground? But I mean, I think to a certain extent, a country that is more, maybe advanced or civilized has more of a moral code.
Yeah.
I think
in some ways, but also like
I think the U.S.
the Congo
has a higher moral code than some of these other countries. In the middle of Africa or Indonesia somewhere that are still cannibalistic tribes. It's like.
I think in some ways, yes. In some ways, like was it King Leopold of Luxembourg or Austria or something like that. He owned the Congo, and he like absolutely gutted that country and like killed millions of people, civilized folks, but he absolutely like destroyed the country. I mean, who knows what their customs were or whatever, but in some ways I think that yes, a more civilized society generally respects human life more in some ways. In other ways, maybe not.
And maybe the tolerance is just of different things. Maybe it's not human life, but maybe it's, wealth and immorality, or maybe it's, other things that is not
just human life. Yeah, that's true. Well, we've covered
this has been a good one.
We've covered all the topics. We didn't solve all the problems, but we talked about them.
we talked about a lot of them.
So, like I said, with tolerance, it's something you need to think about. Where are you going to draw the lines, and where are you going to stand up for what you believe in? This is a critical credo to add into your personal creed, because at some point you do have to take a stand. Like the song says, "I'll take a stand, everybody." Was that Eminem?
Come take my hand. Come take my hand. We walk this road together.
That's right. So, for all those listeners, we appreciate you listening to this podcast. We encourage you to interact with us, whether that's through social media or making a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And let's go ahead and build our creed together.
All right, let's do it.